time to get going here. Welcome to the Portland Children's Levy Allocation Committee meeting for October 22nd, 2018. I am City Commissioner and Allocation Chair Dan Saltzman. And since we last met in June, we are very pleased to announce that Felicia Tripp Folsom has joined the Allocation Committee as the county-appointed representative. So welcome, Felicia. And she comes to us with a distinguished and accomplished background and someone who is creating transformational and positive change in our community. She is currently the Deputy Director of the Portland Housing Center and was previously Executive Director of the Emergence Foundation, as well as the former Scholarship Chair of the Black United Fund of Oregon. Currently, she is a board member of All Hands Raised, an executive board member of the Portland African American Leadership Forum, and chair of the Community Housing Fund. So we're delighted to have you with us and as our colleague, and we look forward to working with you, and just wanted to see if you wanted to say a few words. Or...
Well, I'm so honored to be able to serve the Children's Levy. It's a levy that I've always supported over the years, and the agencies that it serves do tremendous work in this community. And so I look forward to serving on the committee.
Great. Well, thank you. And then I'll introduce the other committee members. On my right, immediate right, is Julie S. Young, the city-appointed Allocation Committee member. And on my far right is Mitch Horniker, representing the Portland Business Alliance. Multnomah County Chair Deborah Kafori could not be with us today. Also joining us today is our Portland Children's Levy staff, which includes Lisa Pellegrino, Meg McElroy, Lisa Hansel, Mary Gay Broderick, John Kelly, and John Coughlin. And I thought, just before we get going, I just thought I'd also announce, since my colleagues up here didn't even know this, but the Children's Levy now is an official city office. It is the office of the Portland Children's Levy. The City Council passed an ordinance probably 3 weeks ago creating the office, the official office of the Portland Children's Levy. It's kind of insider baseball to most people, but I thought it is worth noting. And so before we get started, let's approve the minutes of our June 12th meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Yeah, the minutes are approved. And now we always have a period at the beginning of our meetings if anybody wants to talk to us about something that's not on the agenda, because if it's on the agenda, you'll have a time to speak to it then. But if there's any non-agenda items anybody in the public wishes to address us on, this is your chance. Any takers? I don't see anybody raising their hand, so we will move on. And we're going to kick off the meeting with a video from Levy staffer John Coughlin, who I had to cut off from our last meeting. So we're giving him first shot at this meeting.
Thank you. My name is John Coughlin. I manage the Children's Levy social media program. I'm very lucky I get to travel around and meet our grantees and take photographs and shoot some video and collaborate on the kind of informational material that we produce. I want to take a few minutes to show a couple of very short videos about the levy and the programs that we support. The first here is the Volunteers of America Children's Relief Nursery. Or maybe not. Sorry. We may have technical problems.
Audio?
No audio.
But what they need
Oh, there
is
you
a
go.
connection.
Sorry. Thank you. Take two.
The Volunteers of America Family Relief Nursery is really focused on trying to reduce the number of children that go into foster care. The families that come here are families that we see in high need, but what they need is a connection a connection with the healthcare system, a connection with an educational center. And that's what we provide here. We provide the referral sources, but we also have an in-house program that allows kids to learn. They also are interacting with professionals that can support their parents, learning how to be the most effective parent possible. And one of the things I've learned in my career and in my profession is that if you provide the tools to parents who may not know how to be the most effective parent, they rise to the occasion.
My youngest is 11 months old. My toddler, which is 2, she's going on 3. After Evelyn and Aurora both started coming to the relief nursery, I was able to breathe again. I didn't know that I was drowning myself in kids, but I was able to breathe again, and I started noticing I was starting to get more things done and around the house. There was more laughter in the house. So it's really important for a mom to just know that her kids are safe in a safe environment and her to not have to deal with the stress that comes with kids, because it is stressful even though you love your kids.
Volunteers of America Family Relief Nursery was one of the first programs funded by the Children's Levy, and that would have been in 2003. It's an essential partnership. It's a partnership that I think the city of Portland ought to feel really proud of. There are probably a lot of questions that people have about the role of government and how effective government is. This is one place where I can say government is 100% effective with these families.
So you're going to hear a little bit later from Kiyoshi Owens about the upcoming community engagement initiative. As an example of the type of materials they'll use to introduce participants to the levy, here's a quick 30-second explainer video.
Created by city voters in 2002, the Portland Children's Levy invests in programs designed to prepare children for school, support their success inside and out of the classroom, and reduce racial and ethnic disparities in children's well-being and school success. A 5% cap on administrative expenses, citizen oversight, and annual audits allow us to funnel 95 cents of every dollar to proven programs that help our next generation build a safer and stronger city for all of us.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, John. Those are great. Okay. Thanks again, John. And now for our first main agenda item, staff will give us an overview of the next 2 years as it pertains to the levy funding process from July 2018 through June 2020. There are various processes occurring to help both the allocation committee and staff gain insight and input as we move forward. And staff will brief us now on those projects. And this also includes a report on the local data collection, the recent local data on Portland's children and families that will serve as a reference point as we move forward into the next funding round. And I'll now turn it over to Director Lisa Pellegrino.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all. Welcome, Felicia.
Thank you.
I want to just get, this will just be just a few minutes. I wanted to, of course, Felicia's not been with us before, so this is kind of your first, your formal introduction to just a reminder of where we are in the process now, because it's going to be different. It was different than last time for those of you who were here for the last time. So as you might remember, we ran RFPs in the summer to select consultants to help us with grant-making improvement and to help us with community engagement, and you'll get to hear about that a little bit later. So those are now finished, and those processes have begun. We've been working with the consultants. And we anticipate that the community engagement portion is going to be beginning now as you approve the plan and running basically through the spring through about mid-April. So that's and you'll hear about all the details that'll be going on in that time frame. And then be looking for you all to be coming together in the later spring to make the decisions around the priorities and strategies based on all of this input that you will have heard and the recommendations from the community engagement consultants. So that's sort of the time frame for when you're going to be making those sets of decisions. The grant-making process improvement also begun now, and you'll hear from Meg in a few minutes about what is up with that. That's going to run only through about mid-January is the plan, and that's talking to a set of stakeholders around ideas for how we might change our process or do anything different from last time. We heard a lot of feedback. We'll maybe check some of the things that we heard feedback about the last time we did funding. You'll hear from that group when they conclude their review and make their recommendations in about mid to late January, depending on when we can have a meeting. And then you'll have, from that point on through about the end of the fiscal year, which is the end of June, to be able to make the set of decisions about what do you want that funding process to look like. So we've done it one way, you'll look at doing, do you want to do it a different way? Or do you want to do it the same way, or how do you want to set it up so that staff can then put in place all of the steps that would need to take place in that 1920 year, so that we've left ourselves the whole year of 1920 to be able to do whatever funding process you all decide to do, keeping in mind you might choose something that takes longer to execute than we've done in the past. So that gives you kind of some flexibility. So the spring is going to be a big decision-making time. I more just want to put that on everyone in the audience's map. That's when the committee will be coming together to make those decisions, and also for your own, just for your own self and planning forward. And then the other piece of business in spring that you just need to keep in mind is that we, as we discussed, we would offer an option to renew current grantees for one additional year while this process finishes out. So we'll be running through a renewal process similar to what we did before, and I'll brief Felicia in more detail on what that looks like. But that'll be also in the spring, so we can make those decisions, and we'll look at all the data that we've got. We have to crunch all that data, which we haven't finished doing yet. So that'll all happen, and you'll get a chance to look at all that and review it before those decisions get made, and we'll also have mid-year reports by then too. So that'll be in spring, and kind of beginning of the spring. So that's kind of the set of decisions that you'll be making over this next 9 months now. And that local data report, I was really going to put a plug to encourage you to, when you really need to get some sleep, start that. And if you keep it by your bedside, you can just read little pieces of it. And by the time you have to really think about it, you will have read it all. So it's a lot of information, and we recognize that. A lot of folks in the community collaborate on that with us, and pointed us to data sources for that. But that's as good a thumbnail as we can give you, kind of with current stats on where things are at for children in Portland, and will hopefully help frame your discussion. And may also help frame questions that you have as we go through this process, because if you keep that data in mind, the data, the interaction, the best practices, all that stuff is going to come together as you make the set of decisions on what the process will look like, and then what you end up wanting to fund, or what you want to target for funding. So that's kind of the big landscape. Does anybody have questions about that? I want to make sure that no one's in the dark about where we're heading here.
Questions?
Okay, all right, that's the big picture.
I'm sure
Now-
we'll all have questions as time moves on. But
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'll let Meg take it away. She's going to tell you a little bit about the grant-making process improvement. She's working with PSU on that, so you'll hear where that process is.
We're supposed to.
Trying to solve our technical difficulties there. I'm Meg McElroy, Assistant Director with the Children's Levy, and as Lisa noted, we, over the course of the summer, worked with the Bureau of Procurement here at the city to issue a request for proposals to have a small qualitative research project to gather feedback from past applicants and other stakeholders in our funding processes around how we could improve upon our past processes for grant making. Through that procurement process, we were provided with 4 proposals that were scored by 2 volunteer reviewers and 1 PCL staff member. And the 2 highest scoring proposals, the principals of the agencies that submitted those proposals came back and did interviews as well with that same review committee. And the total scores from that process resulted in Portland State University's Center for Improvement of Child and Family Services receiving the contract to do this consulting work with us. The 2 lead investigators on the project are Tuan Dong and Alma Trinidad. Tuan is a research associate at the center, and Alma is a associate professor at the School for Social Work at Portland State. So they have met with us. They've begun their work. They are in the process of identifying 4 to 6 stakeholder groups for focus groups and 20 interviewees, mainly consisting of past applicants in our process, both applicants that have received funding and applicants who haven't, and applicants who have long history of experience with the levy, and applicants that have had no or limited experience with the levy, and sort of everywhere in between. They have reviewed all of our requests for investment documents, our scoring criteria, our instructions to reviewers, the list of individuals who reviewed last time. They have been provided with every proposal that was submitted by applicants. They've looked at videos of allocation committee member deliberations in funding. So they're taking into account quite a large array of information in trying to formulate who they'll be inviting to the focus groups and interviews. And they're going to approach the project kind of around three parts of our process. The first is what they're calling the pre-application part. So that's kind of how does a potential applicant learn about the levy? Where do they seek information for thinking about how to formulate their proposals? How do they understand where to find information for how to apply? How clear are our proposal guidelines? And then they're looking at the next step is the application process. So that is responding to our RFIs. How clear are the instructions in those documents, the scoring criteria that we use, the score allocation across those criteria, and then the review process. So how we recruit reviewers, how we train them, how we orient them to their work and how they approach their work. And then the third part of the process they're going to look at is the allocation process itself. So the process by which staff makes recommendations, the process by which this body receives testimony or is asked to understand and is advocated to for funding by applicants, and then also just sort of the decision-making process that you use in the meetings. So they're kind of looking at a pretty big picture of our grant-making procedures. They've already, like I said, begun reviewing those materials. They've begun identifying their stakeholder focus groups and interviewees. They'll be conducting those focus groups and interviews over the course of November and early December. They're finishing their review of our materials and then embarking on a literature review for best practices in grant making, especially with an eye toward racial equity in grant making procedures and how to operationalize that. They'll be doing some interviews with a few key local funders who've been doing that work. And they will generate a report with their finding sort of key themes from the strengths of our process, the places where people identified room for improvement, and then they'll be making some recommendations for improvements as well. And we expect all of that to come to you sometime in January. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
So you said they were going to interview 20 grant applicants or
they're going to conduct
successful or unsuccessful grant applicants? Mm-hmm. And then what was it? You mentioned some group right before that. 20.
Focus groups. So they're going to have applicants both. They're kind of determining how to invite applicants either to focus groups or interviews, depending on the way that they kind of create some criteria to determine who might be a better focus group candidate versus an interview candidate. So what we have suggested to them is that given the nature of the competitive process that the levy uses, focus groups are going to have to be done pretty delicately because you've got providers who are competing against each other for funding, and they may or may not want to share certain feelings or parts of their experience or make certain suggestions for improvements in front of their peers. And so some of those conversations might be better had as individual interviews. So the research team is kind of taking into account those variables and trying to construct who they'll invite to which parts of the research process.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, thanks, Meg.
Yeah, thank you.
And we're going to hear from one more person, and then we'll open it up if there's any public comment on either our grant-making review process or the community engagement process. But the final person we're going to hear from is or I see Lisa Hansel walking up here.
I'm going to introduce.
Oh, you're going to do the introduction? Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll turn it over to Lisa. Lisa Hansel.
I'm back in school. I brought the backpack back. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you. I'm Lisa Hansel. I'm a grant manager for the Children's Levy, Child Abuse Prevention, Intervention, and Foster Care program areas. Before hearing from our community engagement consultant, I'm just going to provide some brief background and introduction. As you heard, this summer in June, the Levy published the RFP seeking a consultant to design and implement PCL's community engagement process. Thank you. The findings and recommendations from the community engagement process will inform the priorities and strategies for the next round of investments. As outlined in the RFP, or request for proposals, the goals of the community engagement process are to understand perspectives from diverse stakeholders about the most effective and most needed services for children, especially children from who are most affected by historical inequities. To identify community solutions to improve outcomes for children and families. To cultivate positive relationships with traditionally marginalized populations, and to promote community understanding of Portland Children's Levy funding processes, services provided, and the demographics of children and families served. In response to the RFP, we received 8 proposals. The 2 highest scoring proposals were invited to an interview where they were interviewed, and those interviews scored by a team of 5 evaluators. And Empress Rules was awarded the contract. And it's my pleasure to introduce Kiyoshi Owens, the principal of Empress Rules. We've been working together for about a month now, and it's a pleasure to work with Kiyoshi. She's enthusiastic, and she's very passionate about serving the community and has a deep commitment to equity work. Yeah. Very deep commitment. And I really look forward to our continued work together, to learning from Kiyoshi and the rest of the team, and hearing from the community. And with that, Kiyoshi, I turn it over to you to do more introduction and share background information about yourself and the team, and share the community engagement plan, and entertain questions from the committee.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Kiyoshi Owens, and I'm nervous. Wherever I go, someplace I like to get grounded in where I'm at. And I realize that I'm nervous because, in the 1840s, I wasn't allowed to be here. So the fact that, someone who looked like me would be flogged every 7 days until they left in Oregon, that we've come from there to me sitting here, I needed to take a moment to get grounded in that, because that's huge. I think that my ancestors and my grandparents would be very proud. So I just kind of want to acknowledge where I come from. I'm from North Portland. My grandparents had the freeway put through their house. This is where I come from. My grandmother was from Chicago. My grandfather is from Oklahoma. And they came here in the 1950s. And my grandfather was on the railroad, and he wasn't allowed to be a porter because he was black. And so this is where I come from. And so I just kind of want to share a little bit about who's coming in the space with me, because it's just not me. And that's what this project means to me. It's not a project. It's people that I love and I care about who look different than me, who are suffering. And so I just want to make sure that in integrity that I brought them and their spirits with me into this space. So, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Rachel Layhoff, and I work with RMC Research, and I'm on the research team for this project. My main role in this project is I'll be collaborating with Empress Rules and the PCL staff around developing the data collection instruments, and then I'll also be leading the qualitative analysis of the focus group data. A little bit of my background is as I mentioned, I work for RMC Research, and I am involved both in research and evaluation projects around education and behavioral health. And so I'm excited to be part of this project and part of the community engagement process.
Yes, and we do have other community members who are working on this project. Frida Davis, she's a military veteran, African-American woman who's just absolutely amazing, incredible. We both worked in the Step Up program together. I ran a Step Up program for 3 years at Roosevelt, so you see my files. Came in there at 60% on track to graduate, left at 97%, so that's who you're talking to. That's my love. And a lot of these my super friends, I call them, who are working on this project with us, we all met there. And we're all on the facilitation team. We're all master facilitators. We've all gone through the Heart of Facilitation, created with Peggy Taylor and Hanif Fazil, who is the creator for the Center for Equity and Inclusion. So that's where we come from. There's a Frida Davis, there's Danice Elijah, who's an amazing facilitator and a beautiful mom. Emma Cisneros, she is a community justice advocate, young advocate who is just connected in the Latino community. I am her mentor, and so I created this opportunity for us to connect and work together so we can both teach each other, learn, and grow. And then we have Nakia Solbure, who is from the Anishinaabe or the Ojibwa community. She's one of my best friends. She's a loving mother. Our kids play together. And she's also a part of our facilitation step-up crew. Like I said, all of us have worked there and have all been impacted by Portland Children's Levy funds in some way. I kind of actually grew up in the Portland Children's Levy, starting with my first work-study job was through Portland State. And the one after that was going to Fernwood to do the SUN program. And so that was my first like solid interaction with kids, and I just knew that was something I wanted to do. And even though I would kind of like go away from it and come back, that's where my heart was, and that's what I was really good at. Anyway, so, and then Samiko Taylor-Hero, who is my sister, somebody who I love and has been involved in community engagement. I'm her sister, so like she's been involved in community engagement since she was about 16 years old, and she's 29. She's worked with children who have disabilities and farm workers, the rural area. I'm talking to the rural community. And so this is where my team comes from, and we're all committed to serving the community, and the fact that we actually have an opportunity to get paid for stuff that we do for free because it needs to be done is wonderful. That was a long introduction. So did you want to talk about the plan, or did you have any questions, or?
Yeah, I want you to tell us about your plan so far.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So Lisa already talked about the goals of the project, and I'm just going to talk about a summary of how we're going to, what it's going to look like. And so phase one of the project is creating the plan, which we've already done, and that was just the steps, just thinking about who are going to be the internal and external stakeholders, the timeline, things of that nature, who needs to be involved, who do we need to contact, how are we going to do it, how are we going to communicate with each other, and just make sure that everything is solid, and that's what you have before you. The second phase, that's the fun phase. So that's when we actually get to connect with the communities. And so during the community engagement phase, we'll be going out into the community, dispersing an interest questionnaire that just basically says, hey, I want to participate. I want my voice to be heard in this project. And so we can make sure that we get a diverse pool of applicants and that we're targeting the right communities, because we want those who we're not hearing from, right? And so from there, we will disperse 500 surveys to selected candidates. We'll select 500 candidates to do surveys that will identify the needs, the most needs for the community. And then from there, we will select 80 members to participate in focus groups where we talk about the solutions. So like, what are the solutions to those needs? And so that's phase two. Did you want to talk about anything about how we're going to do it, or?
I'll just say that we're kind of envisioning the focus groups to really be the heart of the community engagement process. That's where we'll be meeting with community members face to face and really getting to hear their stories and getting to hear kind of their experiences with the Levy-funded programs. Mm-hmm. And so we will be, just as part of that process, we'll be either audio taping those sessions and or having someone from the research team take notes, and all of that, the information that they provide, that's really where we're going to be identifying the solutions, as Kiyoshi mentioned, and those will be analyzed qualitatively and then reported on in the recommendation section. So that's
And then participants will also have the community feedback forum where they'll be able to provide us feedback on just their experience for the survey, just the whole process, and then as well as the focus groups. And then the final phase.
How do you go about identifying the participants again?
The criteria. So just ensuring that So by using a point system, assigning points to members who have selected criteria. So we want to hear from people who have disabilities. So if someone is willing to disclose that they have disability, then they would get more points than someone who didn't, because we want to make sure that we have that population.
So people that are going to reach out to you to say, I want to be involved
Exactly.
in this process.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. And it's done through SurveyMonkey. SurveyMonkey has this whole criteria that you can program in there. I'm kind of a little bit of a techie. And so then the first 500 people who have the most points are going to be the people who are most in need. Right? So people who can't speak English, who also have a disability, who are a part of the LGBTQ community. Right? So people who we're not hearing from. Are there any questions about that?
Since you're using technology to reach people with disabilities and these other disenfranchised groups, what do you do if they don't utilize the SurveyMonkey? How are you going to access these vulnerable populations?
Oh, we're going to community events. So we're also going to community events. We'll go to people's houses if we need to. Mhm. Yeah, my mom has a disability. She doesn't have any hands, and she's missing one leg. So I understand what it's like to have challenges accessing information and getting things done.
And part of the rationale for having an interest survey that we disperse really widely, and then the survey, which is going to be dispersed to, select groups, and then narrowing in on that 80 focus group participants, is we want to start with that wide reach and going to these community events to try to get, to access people who are sort of harder to reach. So that's why we kind of have this three-tiered approach to hone in on those focus group participants.
Yeah, and one thing that's been very valuable from those who I spoke to is, one, we allocated funds for them. So even though it's not much, $10 to participate in the survey, so the 500, $10 for that and $100 for the focus groups. Because I want to show our communities that their voice matters and your time matters. And if at the very minimum you can go buy diapers when you leave me, then, humanity, right?
And then to that point too, we're also planning for the focus group specifically, we're going to be providing childcare and
Food.
food, transportation. So we're trying to make these really accessible to folks.
Are you filming or recording the focus groups?
We'll audio record them
Audio
if
record,
everyone consents.
Yeah.
And then as sort of a backup and to supplement that, someone from the research team, myself or Frida Davis, will be there also taking notes.
Okay.
We have a fairly formal structure because we're publicly funded, and the bond, we have a pretty specific commitment to the public about where we're going to spend our money. Then we have some flexibility in terms of what that looks like and where our emphasis is going to be. So I'm just curious, I'm sure you've thought a lot about when you get people in a room and you say, what are we really missing, or what's your greatest need? It kind of has to fall within our universe, or no matter how important it is, we still can't fund it with these dollars.
Yes.
So how do you approach that?
Staying within the parameters, that's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes. So that's part of what the survey is for, is we're answering questions to needs who have already been identified according to what we said that we could fund. So we just have to make sure that we write the right questions. We're just coming up with solutions in the focus groups. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
Right. So we're stuck within those parameters, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, and I think, just from past community engagement processes, we do hear about other needs in the process of the conversations, because they're interrelated. And so I'm sure that the other needs will come up through the process as well. And we've been working with Kiyoshi and the team and helping there will need to be focus on how the focus group questions are framed and keeping people on track to not get off track with a bunch of recommendations that aren't going to be helpful for all of you in deciding on what the priorities and strategies are.
It also, I think, might be helpful for philanthropy that isn't as constrained as we are to know what these other results are if we're keeping track of them as we go. And even though we need to keep swinging people back to our target, if there are some themes that continue to arise, it'd be wonderful if we could get that published and out to folks that might be able to do something
Yeah,
with it.
absolutely. Two things I'm hearing right now just from people I've been engaging with is mental health and childcare.
Yeah.
I mean, housing, I don't have to bring that up anymore. Like, this is Portland, but mental health and childcare. So,
Yeah, and that's great. I think that's great feedback that if we go out of the parameters, we can still pull in some of that information, maybe in a small section of the report or something like that.
Great.
Okay. Any other questions? How did you choose your business name? Empress Rules.
well, that's my baby. That's Empress. She's the beautiful face that you see on the front.
Oh, okay. So,
The reason why I started Empress was that
okay.
I wanted to be able to be myself. I wanted to have beautiful, long dreadlocks and them not be banned at wherever I worked. I wanted to come in, enter, and have my kid there if I needed to, and people can understand she can still get the work done and have a child there. I just looked at the needs of the people, some of the wonderful people that I work with who are wonderful mothers who need accommodations. And that's what equity is, right? Equity is like when we make accommodations for people who have been underserved. And so I wanted to make those accommodations. I got tired and realized that nobody was going to make those accommodations for me. So let me just go ahead and make them and show other people how to make them, and then we can all be free. That's my hope. I just really want people to be able to be their authentic selves, and the color of their skin or where they come from or their language or their ability should not hinder them from being able to pursue life, liberty, and pursuit of, was it happiness? Wasn't that it? I guess you could pursue it, but I would like them to have it. So.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you.
I just wanted to make a comment about, 500 survey participants. I'm not a researcher, but that's a lot of people, and that is a bold goal for, January. Now, maybe it starts before January, and maybe it's going to, but 500 is a lot. What happens if you don't get 500? How might that impact your overall plan?
Well, I never considered failure as an option. Just because of who I am in the community and just how many people that I do know. 500 people isn't a lot of people to me. However, from a research perspective, what do you think?
I think the goal is 500, and we recognize that that is a lofty goal, and that also that that your sample size tends to be smaller than what your ultimate goal is. And we will focus on that goal and really try to reach that goal. But again, I think the sort of where the heart of the research is going to come from is from the focus groups and that qualitative piece. So, if we end up with 300 survey respondents, we'll still be able to analyze that data, and that will provide a really nice quantitative pairing with the qualitative focus group results. So I think we're just focusing on getting both of those pieces so they pair. We want the numbers and then we want the heart. And so we're going to aim for that 500, and we're going to do the best we can. And we recognize that if we don't get that 500, we're still going to get some really rich quantitative and qualitative data.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm pretty confident that they're going to get the 500. John, from our social media expert, is going to be partnering as well, and so we will help get the word out about the surveys as well. So I'm really confident that it's going to happen, but it's good to have a backup plan as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you both for being here today, and we wish you good luck. And now we're going to see if anybody wants to provide us any public comments on either the community engagement process or the grant-making review.
Thank you.
Nice job, ladies.
Anybody wish to give us any input? Okay. Seeing none, I want to thank everybody. We have yet to schedule our next meeting, but it will be posted on our social media sites and an agenda sent to the database. So we stand adjourned. Oh. There's something here to vote on, huh? Okay.
We have to vote on the draft plan.
Oh, okay, I didn't see that. Okay, sorry about that. So we're voting on
On the plan,
on this
right?
plan.
So now that
Empress
you-
on the cover.
Now that you've heard from Kiyoshi and team and have had a chance to ask questions, do you have any recommendations for any changes to the plan? Or are you ready to vote on the plan, vote to approve the plan? Or some other option?
Okay, so we're open for discussion and also for a motion.
So moved. Looks like well thought out, great plan. We've seen we've been involved from early on, and I couldn't be more excited about it.
Great. We have a second?
A second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adopt the draft engagement plan, Portland Children's Levy Community Engagement Plan. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, it passes unanimously.
Great, thank you.
So now we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't see that little word at the end there, vote.